Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. Today, checking out this new album from Ghost, Skeleta. There's a bunch of links down below. You got links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that I put together every week, and the Patreon page. So make sure you check all that out. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. So the band's sixth studio album was released on April 25th. This is their follow-up to their 2022 album, Impera, and then the EP, Phantomine, that they released in 2023. Commercially, both of those did really well. Impera hit number 2 on the Billboard 200, and Phantomine reached number 7. And commercially, I expect this album to do pretty well. I'm sure it's going to be another top 10 album, the band's fourth in a row following Melior, Prequel, and Impera. And to produce the new album, the band brought in somebody that they had worked with previously, way back in 2010, Gene Walker, who produced their first album, Opus Eponymous. And since their debut, Ghost has really grown as a band, even though, I use the term band pretty loosely because it's basically just a solo project from Tobias Forge. The one thing I really like and appreciate about Ghost is that all of their albums so far all have their own sound. They all stand on their own, but they always have these musical strings that tie a lot of them together. But one thing I noticed about Skeleta going through it first couple of times is I think it's lacking a lot of those same strings. As far as the sound goes, I feel like the newer bands that have come out in rock over the last decade or so, a lot of those bands, once they have a really popular album, they kind of keep going back to that same similar sound. They always end up almost sounding like they're trying to recreate that album, and that's one thing that Ghost has really stayed away from. One of the first things I noticed about this new album is comparing this to older Ghost albums. I think there's a lot more poppiness on this album, and that's kind of the one thing that people have always criticized Ghost about, at least from the metal community, is all their albums have this over the top poppiness at times, but I think it's actually a little more intentional on Skeleta. Musically, this is a much more happier album than Ghost has ever done before, and this whole satanic shtick that the band has had since the very beginning, a lot of that's kind of largely missing on this album. It's almost as if the band is trying to wash some of that away to try to appeal to more of a mainstream audience. And I'm all for a band evolving their sound over their career. That's what a band should do. But it's really kind of shocking how fast the band walked away from some of those darker tones, some of the heavier sounds that they had that really established them as such a popular band. And I understand both sides of it because, yes, you always want to grow your fan base. You always want to pull in new people in your music. But I think some of the songs on here, I think this is going to alienate some of the band's older fans. They're kind of losing some of that image that they've had over the last decade or so. But as far as the music goes on the new album, the very first single that they released was Satanized, which I think was picked because it has this more traditional sounding Ghost sound to it. And it was the only single that I listened to before the album came out. So I was kind of surprised when I sat down and listened to this album the first time that, that kind of sound didn't really carry over through the rest of the album. One thing Ghost has always been great at is creating these concept albums that don't really sound like concept albums. They don't come off as forced either, and Skeleta is no exception. But it is a hefty album. There's 10 tracks on here, comes in just shy of 47 minutes long. The opening track on an album has always been really important, but I think it's even more important now in the streaming age that we're in because, a lot of people, once they sit down and listen to your album, they might go through the first couple of songs, and if that first song doesn't really kind of grab them, a lot of people will just kind of move on, and, a lot of times you're not going to get a second chance to make another first impression. But in most cases, that first song really kind of helps set the tone for the album and kind of sets the expectations also. And Peacefield, which is the third and final single the band released before the album came out, I thought it was the perfect way to kick off the album. It starts with almost a minute of this, I guess it's almost like this haunting kind of choir before it kicks into more of a traditional sounding Ghost song. And it sounds like a song that could be straight off of Impera. I think it's very similar to some of the songs earlier on that album. The second single from the album is Lacrima, and it starts off with this guitar riff that sounds like it's ripped straight out of the 80s glam rock scene. And honestly, kind of going over this album, there's a very strong 80s overall sound to this album. And then it kicks into some of the heaviest guitar playing on this album, and it ended up being one of my favorite tracks. And then the third song is the lead single, Satanized, which once I started kind of going over this album, I understand, like I said earlier, I understand why Satanized was the lead single because it has that more classic sounding Ghost sound to it. But I think Lacrima is an overall better song. It probably would have worked better as the lead single. But Satanized does have one of my favorite guitar solos on this album about 2/3 of the way through it. The next song, Guiding Lights, is where I think the band is going to start losing some of their older fans on this new album. I like the opening piano, and it has this kind of flawless progression from that into kind of a heavier sound in the middle part of the song. I think it has some of those elements that people didn't like about Impera, where the band leaned a little too much into the pop metal genre. But in all fairness, I really liked Impera. That was the album that got me into Ghost. And in my opinion, Guiding Lights is a great change of pace song after the first couple of harder songs on the album. And then the next song, De Profundis Borealis, is where I think Ghost really shows how strong of a band they really are. It has the melodic piano that a lot of their better songs have before it kicks into more of a traditional sounding guitar riff that the band's known for. And that's all blended together with Tobias singing in lower register, which I think really suits him. I've never been a fan of him singing those higher pitches. This song really worked for me. I think I'd put this song up in probably the top maybe 15 or 20 songs of the band overall. It has a lot of the energy you expect from a Ghost song before trailing off in this almost eerily haunting kind of ending. And then there's Cenotaph, which I think is how you pronounce the name of the song. I think it's just kind of an okay song at best. Honestly, this is the first song on this album that I could probably do without. It's not a terrible song, but there's nothing really memorable about this one. Listening to this track, though, I'm not a big fan of the way it's mixed. I think the drums are way too out front on this one, and the drums kind of drown out Tobias at parts on it. Missilia Amorei is one of those bigger anthem rock songs on this album something that's Ghost has started getting more and more into over the last couple of albums and couple of EPs. And the first time I listened to it, I thought it had this really strong, almost Scorpion style sound to it. And it's another one of those tracks that sounds, ripped straight out of the 80s. I think it's one of the strongest tracks on this album. Marks of the Evil One has its strong points, but overall, I think it's kind of like Cenotaph. It's a song where I can kind of do without it. I think those two tracks are really the only two skippable ones on this album. Umbra is one of those songs where I think really showcases how good of a band Ghost really is. It starts off with these slowly building synths before the band kicks in. It's a style of song that I don't typically associate with Ghost because it has more of this almost epic rock song sound to it. It's more of a journey through the 5.5 minute long song than any kind of straightforward rock song that Ghost has done before. It's almost like this is Ghost kind of dipping their toes into more a progressive metal sound. And then the album wraps up with the song Excelus, which is a ballad. I think it really kind of helps bookend the album with that, the way that the first song, Peace Field, kicks in with that slower sound. I think it's a good way to end the album also. That sounds like one of those slower songs that could have been off, any of their first 2 or 3 albums. I know Tobias has said in interviews that Skeleta is more of an introspective album, and I think it's something that really comes through on this last song. So as far as my favorite and least favorite songs on this album, I already told you my skippable ones. I got Cenotaph and Marks of the Evil One, which I think Marks of the Evil One is mainly, after I listened to it again, I think it's mainly the chorus I really don't like on that one. And then some of my favorite songs on here, you got Peace Field, Lacrima, Guiding Lights, De Profundis Borealis, and Excelus. Overall, I think there's a lot to like on this album. I like the direction that they're taking on Skeleta, even though I think a couple of those songs didn't really land the way they wanted them to. The production on the album is pretty solid. Just a couple of minor issues here or there. Really just the drums on that one song. On a scale of 1 to 10, I think 7.5 is a good number for me. The first time I listened to it, it was probably closer to 7, but it's kind of grown on me even the 2 or 3 times I've listened to it already. That's kind of how Impera was when I listened to it. The first time I listened to it, there was maybe a couple of tracks I really liked on there. And then the more I listened to it, the more it grew on me. It ended up being, I think, one of my favorite albums of the year. We'll see where Skeleta lands on my list at the end of this year. And whenever I do these album reviews, I always ask, is this an album that I buy a physical copy of? Well, you saw at the beginning, of course I already have one. I went out on release day and bought the Target version. So I didn't pre-order this album because, there's always a delay when you're getting it from either the band or the label or any kind of online website other than Amazon. But I wanted to go out and grab the Target version of it. So it's on this cool purplish kind of color, neon purple. And then it did come with a slip mat, which a slip mat is black on one side, purple on the other, which is not the reason why I wanted it. I just wanted to have a physical copy of it. I didn't want to wait a day or two to get a copy. And it also came with this really cool Papa 5 overlay, which it's kind of hard to see. I'll put it on the back of the album here, so you can see. I'll put it over the back so you can see it a little better when I put it over the album. So it's kind of cool. The funny thing was, like I said, I didn't want to pre-order the album because I didn't want to wait. And then on Saturday, the day after release day, I woke up in the morning and saw I had an email notification that I had an album showing up, and I had no clue what it was. I don't remember pre-ordering this, but I also pre-ordered a copy from their website. Yes, it's a different color, but here, I guess since it's not in the sleeve that my other one's in, I can show you. It's got this like really cool reflective cover on it, which I think all of them do. Same with the back cover there. And then the album itself is in a printed inner sleeve, which that's a really cool picture of Papa 5 on there and the Nameless Ghouls. It's got all the track listing and lyrics on the back side of it. And then this version, I got this from, I think it was their website. And this is just a translucent purplish kind of color, which I think is kind of cool. Like I said, I've been trying not to buy multiple copies of albums over the last 6 or 8 months. I obviously didn't remember pre-ordering this one, but it's cool. I love the album so far. We'll see what, like I said, come the end of the year when I do my top 10 or top 20 albums of the year, we'll see where this one lands. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think of this new album from Ghost. Have you picked it up yet? Have you listened to it? What would you rate the album? Hopefully you haven't bought multiple copies of the album like I have, but let me know what you guys think. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.